Jose Antonio Vargas of the Washington Post.
Jose Antonio Vargas is a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist.
I lived the American dream, building a successful career as a journalist. But I was living a lie. I'm gonna tell you something that I haven't told a lot of people. I'm actually an undocumented immigrant. Immigration is stories, so here's my story. My grandparents legally immigrated from the Philippines in the mid-1980s. My grandfather decided that he was gonna get his grandson to come to America. One morning, my suitcase was packed. I was 12. It's been 18 years since I've seen my mother. So I'm launching a whole campaign about what it means to be an American and the fact that I am an American. There are 11 million undocumented people in this country. In 2010, undocumented people paid $11.2 billion in state and local taxes.
My name is Erika Andiola. I'm from Colombia.
From Nigeria.
From Brazil.
I'm an undocumented immigrant from Germany.
We work at your houses. We mow your lawn. Maybe we're your doctors. We're not who you think we are.
People who have come here illegally should not be citizens of the United States.
So what happens in Iowa if you discover as a cop that somebody's an undocumented person?
I'm looking for freedom, looking for freedom.
A major blow for immigration reform. Today, the Senate voted against the DREAM Act.
I'm a conservative and I'm a hardcore Republican, but I don't agree with them on this.
You're an illegal alien.
No, I'm an undocumented immigrant.
No, you're an illegal.
Wait, no, actually, this is...
I think I've broken a law just having you in my studio.
Who is really the Americans? I would say people who came here to do good for this country.
We dream of a path to citizenship. We dream of contributing to the country we call our home. I have this fantasy that I get a green card and I fly, and that my mother will be there waiting for me. So you just saw the trailer for the film. My favorite writer, probably my biggest artistic influence, is a guy named James Baldwin. If you don't know who he is, look it up. And he said that nothing can be changed until it is faced. Nothing can be changed until it is faced. So this film, Documented, is actually a lot of things. One of the things is, for me, it's since undocumented people like me are getting detained and deported every day, the film for me is an act of civil disobedience. The film is also a way for me to own my own story and to face myself, which if you've spent your entire 20s and teenage years hiding from yourself and hiding from the government and hiding from people who are illegal, could be a very traumatic thing. And actually, for me, that process of facing myself has its roots here in Chicago. This is a YouTube video. In March 2010, there was a historic day when undocumented young people, not too far from here, actually stood outside of a federal building and told the media, told everybody that they were undocumented, unafraid, and unapologetic. This was in March 2010. At that time, I was sitting in my apartment in New York. I was 29 years old. I had just finished working on my first documentary. I was about to profile Mark Zuckerberg for The New Yorker. Many people thought that I was, quote unquote, successful, yet I was completely and utterly miserable. Like a lot of these young people in Chicago, I too was undocumented, but unlike them, I was very, very much afraid, and I was very, very sorry. People don't realize that to be undocumented actually means to obsess with documents, obsessing over pieces of papers. I've been obsessing over papers since I was 16. That's when I went to the DMV to get a driver's license and realized that the green card that my grandfather had given me 4 years before was actually fake. A year later, I was so obsessed with documents that I decided to be a journalist for the sole reason that my name would be documented on a piece of paper. So my name would be in a paper, which meant I existed, I'm contributing, I'm writing in English, I'm interviewing Americans. How can they say that I'm not here? Right? I was basically hiding in plain sight. And then a few years later, the Washington Post called and said, hey, we're going to offer you an internship, but you have to have a driver's license to come here. This was in 2003. This was 2 years after an Illinois senator named Dick Durbin co-introduced a bill called the DREAM Act. And this is right around the time when the Immigration and Naturalization Service became the Immigration and Customs Enforcement, which is housed under the Department of Homeland Security. Somewhere up there, George Orwell is like smiling really widely. The Department of Homeland Security. But I really wanted the job. And I figured out that I could go to the library and I could figure out the requirements for each one of the 50 states, how to get a license. And I figured out that Tennessee and Oregon had the most lenient requirements. And I was in California, and Tennessee was all the way over there, and Oregon was up there, so I went to Oregon, and I got the license. This is like your nightmare. Your driver's license blown up. There it is. It was issued, as you can tell, in June 2003. It expired on February 3rd, 2011, which was precisely my 30th birthday, which meant that I had 8 years. I had 8 years to earn what being an American is. Unlike many of you who were born in this country and have the privilege of being an American, people like me have to actually kind of earn it. So I thought maybe I should write for like a big paper like the Washington Post. Maybe I should win like a big prize or something, like a Pulitzer or something. Maybe I should cover a presidential campaign because people think political reporters are like really cool. Not. I did all those things. 8 years passes by and nothing happens. Immigration reform is dead. My life is still in limbo. And at that point, I was done. I was done lying. I lied to all of my employers. I lied to my friends. When somebody asked me, hey, why don't you go to Mexico for a wedding? I'm like, I don't like Mexico. When I got offered a job to cover Iraq, to go to the war, to cover the war in Iraq, and I said, no, it's okay. Like, I like to play video games and covered video games instead. All these little lies just started adding up, and I was done. I was done. So I decided to come out about being undocumented and start an organization called Define American, right? Define American ? And that question to me strikes at the core of how we think about immigrants and citizenship in a demographically evolving America. So the question is, how do you define American? Is it pieces of papers? Do you define American by where you're born? Do you define American by what you call your home? So since we started Define American in June 2011, I've done maybe about 300 events in 44 states and 120 college campuses. And what I've really learned in the 3 years of nonstop traveling is that with so much people talking about immigration, most people know little about immigration. So some figures, 34,000. Every day, Congress mandates ICE, the immigration agency, to actually put at least 34,000 immigrants in detention centers all around the country. That's called a bed quota. Anybody here heard of that? Who do you think pays for that? And who do you think profits from it? 2 million. President Obama, our president, formerly senator from Illinois, adopted son of Chicago, has deported about 2 million people in his 6 years in office. That's more than any other president in the history of this country. About every day, as I'm talking to you right now, about 1,000 people are getting deported every day. And here's a really interesting figure that no one talks about, 17 million. 17 million people in America live in households that's called mixed status households. So I'm Filipino. We're like the Italians of Asia. We have huge families. So out of like 30 people in my family, out of my cousins, my nieces, my grandparents, my aunts, I'm the only one of 30 who's undocumented. That's the reality of immigration in cities all across America, including in Chicago. So Define American actually took me to Texas this past summer. Like I'm sure all of you, I was disappointed and frustrated and angered by how the Central American crisis, how the refugees, these children, were being talked about. And for me, this was really a tipping point. I saw this headline on CBS News called, "Is the surge of illegal child immigrants a national security threat?" These are kids we're talking about. What if that was your kid? What if that was your brother? What if that was your sister or your student? Right? And to me, this moment actually underscored and the question of, is it a national security threat? All it did was make us question our own conscience. The crisis at the border with these kids, to me, underscored the fact that we as Americans are unwilling to ask the real hard questions about this issue. Like questions like, why are these kids from Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador coming here? What are actually the roots? What are the root causes of migration? What does U.S. foreign policy and U.S. trade agreement have to do with migration patterns? And as a country whose cultural history and economic necessity is tied and defined by immigrants, we are a country addicted to cheap labor. Talk to the African slaves who built the South in America. Talk to the undocumented day laborers, migrant workers, and service workers that you see in restaurants who make up the backbone of our economy. We are not asking any of these questions. We are not connecting any of these dots. So I went to Texas. Anybody here been to the Rio Grande Valley in Texas? Raise your hand. I'd never been. I've been to California, I've been to Arizona. I flew in. The only piece of ID that I have, because the government took away my driver's license, is a Filipino passport with no visa in it. This is how I fly. This is how I got to O'Hare this morning. This is how I'm leaving O'Hare tomorrow morning, right? So I figured I go to Texas flying, and I'm going to get out by flying. No problem. And then one of my friends, this lawyer friend of mine who's based in Chicago, Moni Ruiz Velasco, I think she's here. Where are you, Moni? There she is with her daughter, Emma. So Moni texted me and said, oh, I'm so happy you're there. How are you going to get out? I'm like, yo, what are you talking about? I'm going to get out, right? I didn't realize that at the airport, there would actually be a Border Patrol agent sitting next to a TSA agent as I board a domestic flight. So as I boarded the flight, gave the passport to the Border Patrol guy, he said, are you here illegally? I said, yes, because I'm done lying, I'm done hiding. Before I knew it, he handcuffed me, put me in a van, and put me in the exact same detention center as these kids, right? But then the government, I guess, was a little afraid of what might happen, so 8 hours later, after being put in the same cell as some of these kids, they let me out. They let me out, and for the first time, I was actually issued my first pieces of government papers, and on top of it, it says, warrant for arrest of alien. So this is my only piece of paper from the US government that I've been living in for 21 years. So then I call Moni, I'm like, what do we do? What do we do? Then Moni said, hey, why don't we ask 10 other people to come forward with you, and why don't we ask the Department of Homeland Security to actually grant us some sort of reprieve? So that's exactly what we did. We launched a campaign called 1 of 11 million, representing the diversity and the complexity of the immigration issue in America. There's an undocumented German woman who's been here for 25 years, an undocumented man from Senegal, been here for 23 years. The Korean guy, right there in front, Jong Min, has been here for 33 years. And actually, there's a man here that I've gotten to know and love named Felipe Diosdado, who's from Chicago, who settled here around 1997. He actually owns a home. He's an undocumented worker that owns a home in the city of Chicago. He is the father to 2 amazing kids, Isaac, who's 11, and Felipe Jr., who's about to be 9. And Felipe told me this morning to make sure to say that Isaac has been a straight A student from 1st grade to 6th grade, so that's a really, really big deal. So here's what happened. So Felipe, the great state of Illinois, is finally allowing undocumented people to get licenses to drive. Felipe goes to get a driver's license. Before you know it, he's being detained. He was detained and separated from his kids, from his 2 sons and his partner, for a month. And when he was out, he joined our campaign. He ended up on the cover of the Chicago Tribune to tell his story in a very brave and courageous way. And do you know what happens after he gets on the front page of the Chicago Tribune? He loses his job. He doesn't have a job. And do you know what happens? Isaac and Felipe Jr., whenever they hear a knock on the door, they think it's the government and immigration trying to take their dad away. Felipe and Isaac are actually here today. Can you stand up? Please stand up. So Felipe and Isaac are among the 500,000 undocumented people in the state, the countless mixed status family in the state. Now the question is this: what are you going to do? Your silence is no longer acceptable. You know we're here. You know you need us. You know we're driving in the same freeway, going to the same school, shopping at the same mall. You know that your economy would collapse without us. Silence is no longer acceptable. And every civil rights movement, and this is a civil rights movement, needs a symbol. This is one symbol. I've been pledging allegiance to this American flag since I was 12. And like the 11 million other undocumented people like me, we are pledging allegiance to the flag that doesn't even recognize us. So we created this symbol so that you, all our allies out there, can show your public support and stand as allies and show us what a movement really looks like, right? So if you go to defineamerican.com, you can see this pledge sign, and you can put it on your Twitter handle or your Facebook account, just to show that you don't think that Isaac should lose his dad because our country and our politicians have been unable to have an honest conversation and face us as Americans that we are. So the last point I want to make, this is Chicago, home to many, many Filipinos. All I have to do is go to O'Hare and see all my fellow Filipinos at the airport. I was in Louisiana yesterday. The first Filipino settlement was actually in the state of Louisiana in 1763, 2 years before the American Revolution began. When people ask me all the time, why am I here? Why are there so many Filipinos in America, 4 million people? I tell them, we are here because you were there. The Philippines, of course, being once a protectorate and a territory of the United States. When I ask people how do you define American, that to me is a part of the question. And we need you to be a part of the solution. Thank you so much for having me here today. Thank you.